This is Mark Tobias with James Mustarde. You're the marketing director
I am,
for
David.
Twisted Pair in Seattle, Washington. Correct. First of all, tell us, what is Twisted Pair?
Twisted Pair is a software company that produces a software application called WAVE, which is a communications interoperability platform.
And what's its connection with Wave Connections?
Well, Wave Connections is powered by WAVE. Wave Connections is a service that uses the fundamental WAVE application.
Okay, and how long have you been around?
Just over 10 years, in fact.
And you serve both corporate, commercial, and military users?
Correct. Our history is really around military and government communications operations. And in the last few years, we've expanded quite significantly into the commercial space.
Okay, so I'm in Europe, and I've got colleagues in America, in Europe, and Asia, and I'm talking to them on my smartphone as a conventional walkie-talkie like we used to use. Right. In my state, we developed a digital trunk radio system to incorporate all law enforcement across South Dakota. Mm-hmm. This system is really a virtual radio system in the cloud.
Correct. It's a push-to-talk service that uses IP instead of a dedicated private proprietary radio network.
Right. So I'm a radio guy. Mm-hmm. I grew up with radio. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about the differences between a conventional radio system versus radio, what I'll call radio over IP, right, which is really what it is. Right. And essentially, you don't need any spectrum, because correct, you're using all the cellular carrier spectrum, correct, to replace discrete frequencies or channels.
Correct.
And there's no licensing, there's no spectrum allocation issues, there's no handset issues. It's secure.
Correct.
You're using
we natively encrypt to a S256.
Right. So, which is good enough.
Good enough.
And is there any impact on performance whether you encrypt or do not encrypt?
No.
Because there's an option to do that.
There is. We don't recommend that people do not encrypt. It's natively a ES256. We have customers in the defense and government space that add their own special encryption to the front end.
Right, of course. So you're using this, there's a lot of law enforcement now that are starting to employ radio over IP.
Correct.
Especially, I believe, up in Canada, they're looking at it, they're actually using it.
We have customers in Canada.
How do they like it?
They love it.
So essentially, this is a free, other than subscription service, this is a free push-to-talk communication service for any number of users on a dedicated channel that you set up anywhere in the world.
So Wave Connections as a service has two components. There is a free service for 5 users, 1 channel, which really gives people the taste, the flavor of what this service is all about.
It's a leader item.
It's a leader, exactly.
Yeah.
And then there is the business user service, right, which is really aimed at the serious business communications user that wants unlimited channels, unlimited users, and so on and so forth.
Okay, and right now the price per user is like $24.95 a month, is that correct?
Yeah, that's where we're at the moment.
That's paid, but that's not your enterprise system.
That's not the enterprise system. There is a third tier that we will be introducing later this year, which is really intended at larger organizations that want to introduce their enterprise telephony, their radio systems, their enterprise application type networks into Wave Connections to truly expand the footprint of those.
So will they have to provide their own servers, or you provide them?
Well, no, it's a cloud service.
So it's still a cloud service.
Correct, it's still a cloud service. What we're simply saying is that whatever you have from an enterprise perspective, you can add that into your Wave Connection service and extend those traditional communication systems into Wave Connections.
Okay. Last year I was at the Microsoft GSOC in right, Redmond, mm-hmm, one of 3 that they operate in the world. Correct. To control all their campuses, all their security.
Correct. That will.
And we used a radio system, mm-hmm, that was linked into their software so that we picked up a walkie-talkie in Redmond and talked to Hyderabad, India, mm-hmm, to control their center and into England. Mm-hmm. That's your system?
We work with Microsoft because they have different types of radio systems around the world. As you mentioned, their global security operations around the world manage security, physical security for all of their people and their premises. They have failover capability, so if one GSOC is shut down for whatever reason or requires to go offline, then those radio networks and therefore those security operations can be managed from a different location. That requires radio interoperability.
Yeah.
And so that's what we provide for them.
And that's really an important point. When I spoke with your folks last week, you, especially for the military,
Right.
you're providing interoperability with all the different platforms.
Correct.
And so essentially they can replace their discrete radio systems with ruggedized smartphones that all the kids are used to using. And they can talk across all the platforms, Windows, iPhone, iOS, Android, and desktop.
Essentially, yes. What we're saying is that the network, the platform, the device becomes almost ambiguous. We don't care. Wave Connections doesn't care. You can have a smartphone running iOS talking to a smartphone, an Android smartphone. They could be talking to two-way radio networks. They could be communicating with enterprise telephony, or they could be communicating with people who might use a Microsoft application like Lync or SharePoint.
Right.
Wave Connections doesn't really care where the audio
As long as you
originates
connect to the
from.
network.
As long as you're connected to the network,
Right.
we don't care.
And you can do this on a 2G, 2.5G edge connection, 3G, 4G networks.
So we're recommending 3G, 4G and above. You know, we have the reason that we are so well established and popular with government and military customers with our wave hat on is that we can go much lower than that.
Yeah.
But from a connection service today, then 3G, 4G is really where you want to be at in order to do
But
that.
the reality is, if I'm sitting on a cruise ship, for example, it generally has edge is about the fastest you're going to get on a micro cell site on a cruise ship.
Correct.
Routing through MTN. There's no problem with that connectivity. And I can take my BlackBerry or my Android or my iPhone. It works great on my iPad, and everything's interoperable and everybody
Correct.
can talk. And you can put any number of users, program any number of users into what I call a talk group.
Correct.
You call it a channel.
There are no theoretical limits to the number of users that you can have on a channel. I mean, like anything, the more people that you have on a channel, the harder it is for an individual to be able to monitor that.
Right.
But generally speaking, there is no limit.
Okay, and what's the latency? With two-way radio, it's instant. I let off my push-to-talk button, we're done. There's no store and forward, there's no delays, because you're not, it's point to point.
Right.
What's the is there a significant delay with cloud-based radio?
No.
So,
I mean, there is no such thing as no latency in radio because the signal actually has to go from one point to another.
At the speed of light, one does
Correct.
not notice it. In your service, you notice it.
There is a very, very, very small degree of latency that typically is determined by the number of hops that you may have to go across networks.
Right.
But for I would say the vast majority of users, it's not noticeable.
Nextel is shutting down IDEN.
Right.
Within the next 2 years, probably a lot sooner than that.
They're already shutting down
Yeah.
towers. Right.
So what's going to, first of all, is IDEN, are they gone? Do
No,
you
they're
know?
not gone at all. You know, they have a new version of IDEN, but the basic fact is that IDEN is a proprietary single network operation, operating on a select number of devices, with contracts and a pricing structure that is attractive to some people, but not to others.
But is Sprint, when I talk to Sprint, they say they're discontinuing push-to-talk service. Is this correct, or are they really keeping it?
They are not. They are discontinuing it using IDEN. They are rolling out push-to-talk service
With radio over IP?
With using their CDMA network.
Yeah.
So they
Same
are.
difference.
Yeah. So they are not doing radio over IP, although they have made some noises to suggest that they would offer radio integration on a carrier push-to-talk service in the future.
So is your company prepared to migrate Nextel users who are going to be looking for global radio over IP service as opposed, Nextel is in like 7 countries, but mainly Canada and America. If you, with global operations for businesses, your company is ideally suited to move into that space that's taken up right now by Nextel.
I mean, yes,
I'm assuming
you've
that's
kind
in
of
the
really
business
nailed
plan.
it. You've really kind of nailed it. We don't care what the transport is. We don't care the carrier. We don't care whether it's a Wi-Fi network in the hotel in Dubai, or whether it's a 3G or 4G network in South Africa. Wherever there is access to the network, you can have real-time push-to-talk with presence and mapping, on any device.
Do you think that in the future this is the way radio systems are going, especially because of spectrum shortages?
We don't believe that that radio systems are going to run out of usefulness anytime soon. But we certainly believe that IP is a tremendous enabler to extend the value and the capability of radio networks.
Can I get into your system regardless of how I get to the network? If I'm on Wi-Fi,
Doesn't matter.
it doesn't matter.
That's just access.
However I get to you, it doesn't matter.
We don't care.
What options are coming? Because I was told by your technical people that there's new software that's coming.
So wave connections will, we talked a little bit about the business user, which will allow radio integration I'm sorry, that's enterprise use. The enterprise application will allow two-way radio integration to the network. So you can imagine if you're an existing mobile workforce manager who has guys out in the field, teams out in the field that are using maybe NextEdge radio systems, Chem radio systems, Motor Turbo radio systems. They would like to add the audio and the talk group capability of those workforce, those mobile workers, into their wave connection service. We will enable that in the enterprise environment. Same for enterprise telephony, picking up the phone and making a phone call into a wave connections channel in order to talk to a group of users. Or if you were sitting at a SharePoint desktop or maybe a Link desktop for your collaboration or unified communications, being allowed to select from that desktop environment talk group channels so that you can talk to people.
Are you looking to tie into Facebook, Google Plus, any of the social media? Have you looked at that?
It's software. I mean, it's amazing what you can do. I think the important thing is that we're very serious about this mobile workforce communications. There are applications today that allow this sort of social network centric communications. We're at the mall, let's meet up, we're going to go out, let's do this. Wave Connections is really aimed at business users who absolutely want to guarantee communications with their mobile workforce. And to some extent, that social media enabled side of it is probably not on their radar. It probably doesn't make sense to them. But from a technological standpoint, there is no reason why the underlying software for Wave Connections, which is Wave, can't be ported to Facebook in some way to provide a social interaction.
Yeah, well, I see that already Google Plus is tied into Facebook. There's several of them are doing it now. It's tough to compete with Skype and all the others.
Well, these are point-to-point, Skype, they're point-to-point, and we're talking about one-to-many, which is really what a push-to-talk environment is all about. We've had discussions and conversations to provide such capability in the past, and it's not something that we believe is being required or being asked for by any large organization.
Do you think the carriers, the cellular carriers around the world, are going to start adopting your technology?
We have certainly had and continue to have a number of discussions with carriers who are looking for an over-the-top type of service.
Because everybody, I grew up with push-to-talk, and for me it's an incredibly convenient, folks that haven't used it, I don't think they understand it.
Right.
Because it's an instantaneous, John, I need to do this, Bob, okay, whatever. I don't need to make a phone call. I don't need to bother you with your phone ringing. I don't need, everybody's got unlimited plans now, so it doesn't matter. There's no more toll calls. They don't exist in America. But push to talk, and that's why Nextel has survived with their service so long. It's 30 years when Motorola developed it, because it is incredibly convenient and it's efficient. And so I think when people get introduced to the concept of push-to-talk without having to carry a separate radio, that I would suspect in a lot of business environments it would be incredibly popular.
We recently spent quite a lot of time at field service type conferences and exhibitions where we have had long and deep discussions with organizations that have a lot of field workers in the hospitality space, in the utility space, in transportation. And being able to add push to talk to a single device that also provides mapping and tasking software and so forth is a huge potential benefit.
Oh yeah, huge.
Huge. Especially as some of their radio networks, and IDEN as an example, is becoming obsolete. So they're looking to take the next step that says, I want a single device. You know, you see iPads in the cockpits of aircraft these days. You know, why does the pilot have to get off the airplane to be able to go to a radio room to be able to speak to mother, 6,000 miles away, when he could literally push to talk from his iPad that interfaces whatever radio networks are provisioned for him in an airport situation.
Well, I'm just thinking AirRink, if you're familiar with that. They've been around for about 40 years. We actually had them tied into State Police Radio in South Dakota because we needed to talk to aircraft in an emergency. This is an ideal use for AirRink pilots because all of AirRink pilots were linked together in all aircraft. It's a private network. Right. And so for dispatch operations, especially for flight attendants, for pilots, this is much more convenient.
Right.
It's also, have you talked to or explored the possibility for emergency notifications?
You know, we have potential business dealings, existing business dealings with lots of public safety and alerting and type situations. We work with police departments, around the country because they want to supplement two-way radio systems. We're working with obviously the military that wants to project command and control throughout the world, especially on very very thin, very skinny networks, sharp pointy end, if you like. And then we're talking to large commercial organizations, airports and airlines, for example, that have footprint all over the globe, and they're currently limited by circuits, maybe fixed circuits they pay a lot of money for. Wouldn't it be great if they could just connect all of those remote facilities over an IP network without having to have dedicated infrastructure, which costs an awful lot of money?
Yeah, that's right. And why not let the public carriers replace private infrastructure? Which is really what's been happening anyway.
Yeah, and the consumerization of these devices makes devices like this in your iPad.
So it's incredible.
Incredibly affordable. It's almost pointless to deny that this is the way ahead. I mean, it's just...
Yeah, well, when I began my conversation with all your technical people in the briefing, this was my point. This is rather obvious.
Yeah.
Why would I want to spend $2,000 on a Motorola radio or other brands or Harris or whatever when I can do the same thing with my little computer in my hand that has radio built into it?
Right.
And as a telephone. Last question, are you familiar with Tetra in Europe?
Yes.
How do you compete with Tetra?
Well, Tetra is a digital radio system just like P25 in
that's
the
correct.
US. There are plenty of opportunities in Europe to say, let's extend Tetra, or let's do more than Tetra provides. Tetra is a single function radio system just like P25 or any other radio system. Wouldn't it be great if we could do Tetra voice on an IP device and extend the reach of Tetra to people who don't have a handset, don't need a handset, or to users who are on a completely different radio system altogether?
Where's your biggest installation or implementation?
The United States, United States military are by far and away our largest customer, without question. Special operations, government communications, all people who rely upon instant, reliable, secure communications anywhere in the world love our technology.
But does that mean that they have to rely on cellular carriers for cloud-based services?
No.
Or do they have to provide their own?
They can do both.
They can do both.
Yeah. As I said before, we don't care what the transport is. Depending on the level of security that is required or is perceived to be required, this can be provisioned over a private network. Wave Connections is our cloud offering.
Right.
The very same capability can be provided over a private network. You know, we don't. The technology doesn't care.
So James, what haven't I asked you? What have I missed?
You know, I think you've done a great job in covering. I mean, I think what people should understand is that Wave Connections is a technology, a service that's aimed at people who are serious about their business connectivity. It's not intended to be a lightweight push-to-talk social network-driven system. It is a service that delivers, you know, secure comms.
On any system.
On any system.
Which is really cool, because whether I'm on a CDMA-based system in America or a GSM network overseas, it doesn't matter.
It does not matter at all.
And you were on Amtrak coming down this morning.
I was on Amtrak coming down. I was talking on the on the network to my colleagues back in Seattle. They could see where I was. I actually had to remind them that they didn't have to ask me if I'd got into Vancouver yet, because I was right smack there in the middle of the mapping function.
And that's the last thing that I actually didn't cover. Built into your software is geographic mapping.
Yeah, I mean, on any device that is GPS enabled, we can use that GPS information to show users on the network exactly where those people are, which is fabulous for field service management, because you know, that truckload of concrete better be on the way to the pour, because we can see exactly where you are. And so you know, excuses that you're stuck in traffic 20 miles away when really you're having a cup of coffee don't work anymore.
And what about logging? Is your company keeping logs of all the traffic, or do they have the capability of recording the conversations if a customer would want that?
So at the moment, we're not keeping logs. What we're doing is we understand, you know, the proxies and that they're open and so forth. So we understand usage and so forth. But at the moment, we're not recording. A later version of the service will provide a recording. So at the moment, we do presence. So we know who's on the channel and we know who spoke. So that if you want to look at your presence tab, you can say, oh, I see that was Fred that just called me a couple of seconds ago that spoke. Future versions will actually have the option to record what he was saying on that channel. So you can instantaneously update yourself and say, I missed that. What did he say? Okay, great. Thanks very much.
And so you have caller ID on the
we know
calls
who's anybody who's logged into the system. You have to have a login ID to access the system. And so once you're logged into the system knows who you are. We can tell anybody who's on different channels, who's on the channel, last time they spoke, and of course, based on GPS, where they are located.
Yeah, I was just thinking, because you're from England, the Financial Services Authority has now mandated, for example, that if stockbrokers used your system, it would all have to be recorded. So
because it's software, there's nothing stopping people, you know, add that capability from an on-premise perspective. We have plenty of customers who essentially deliver the same kind of thing, but because it's provisioned on-premise, it's on their own servers, then they can do all of that themselves. Wave Connections today doesn't allow users to provide all that recording, but that's just capability down the road that we'll turn on.
James, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.